wonderful to see so many people here to celebrate such an amazing part of our community. And she is so uncomfortable right now. And I actually think that's my favorite part of this whole evening. We are going to start setting the bar exceptionally high. So while we are here to celebrate Jill, I am incredibly touched and proud that President Daniels can join us tonight, and it's a testament to Jill's work over so many decades. So without any further ado, there are a lot of people who are going to celebrate Jill, but we really wanted to start with you, Ron. So thanks.
So good evening, everyone. A lot going on around us in higher education right now. A lot of challenges coming our way that, as you would expect, the leadership team of the university is firmly focused upon and working sedulously to deal with a whole host of different shocks that come principally from Washington these days. Those are very challenging, at times overwhelming, but they don't hold a candle to what has been my consuming concern for the last several years, which is, what are we going to do if Jill actually decides to leave? Because that's a shock, that is a disruption, that is a state of affairs that I can barely contemplate. What are we going to do if Jill were to actually leave? And so, it's, of course, you take your guidance from, the paradigms are out there, and of course, it's Kubler-Ross, how do you deal with grief? And so, I think I'd like to say that I've gradually moved through all those stages, starting with anger and denial, and ultimately got to acceptance, but I'm not there. I refuse to believe that Jill Paulson is actually going to leave. Because in some sense, challenge here tonight, Jill, is how does an institution say goodbye and thank you to an institution? Because Jill Paulson is an institution. She's bigger than any one of us. She has taken on a role that is outsized in terms of how she has built things, how she's recruited people, how she's championed our cause, her incredible optimism, her belief in us. It's indeed not captured in the idea of a single individual. You can't start crying yet. It's not saying goodbye to a person. It's really saying goodbye, and as I said before, thank you to an institution. So when we think about the various things that Jill has bequeathed to us, the programs, Second Decade Society, the Young Leadership Fellows Program, the Parents Roundtable, there's so many different initiatives and so many other things that she has been responsible for, that she has conceived ideas, ways of bringing people into the fold and then enlisting them and giving them a sense of the magic of this place. And it's extraordinary. And I have to say that all those things are important. But what is really remarkable, Jill, is when I think about the great privilege I have to lead this institution and ultimately work with academic leaders throughout the university, to work with great students, faculty, staff, alumni, but fundamentally, I know who my boss is, and that's the Board of Trustees of the university. And it's to that board that I've had the pleasure and the privilege to work with, of people who, of course, are philanthropically supportive, but the truth is, what they give more than anything is their time, their effort, their moral sense of the place, just their stalwart support in so many different dimensions. That's really the group that, that I think a lot about, who ultimately are responsible for steering the university. And here's the thing, if you look at the people who are on that board, who are ultimately the ones who are charged with carrying the responsibility of steering this institution, of supporting our cause, of being there when we face challenges, of having our back, of investing in our crazy, outlandish ideas, that board I think there's probably, I was saying to Fritz earlier and discussing with Maureen Marsh, the Secretary of Board, I think it's fair to say that almost everyone who is on the board has some connection to, has benefited from, or in fact has been cultivated almost from the time they entered the university, has been cultivated for a leadership role by Jill. And that's amazing, because it's in that way that Jill has really encoded her values, her aspirations, her sensibility, her generosity, her humanity has been encoded in the governance of the university. Those people get us, by and large, because they got the opportunity to learn this place through her eyes, her passion. So, when we say, how do we say thank you? How do we imagine life without the institution that is Jill Paulson? The truth is, the institution has become deeply embedded in the institution of this university. That's how we know. I was asking Jill before, Jill and David, what happens on July 1st? And they were saying, well, she's gonna be in London, and then she's gonna do this, and then she'll take a beat. But I said, wait a sec, you're talking about how is Jill gonna be post July 1st? I'm not worried about her, I'm worried about me. I'm worried about me. This is about all of us. And I think the answer to how we're gonna cope with the departure of Jill is that she's not really going, because so many people who have been tutored by her and have learned this place through her incredible decency and humanity now are the ones who are basically in so many different walks of life, not just on the Board of Trustees, but throughout the large alumni base within this institution, the staff members who populate so many different and critical departments of the university. They get this place because of you, and you've encoded on all of them and on all of us and on our trustees. And that's how we know we're gonna be okay, because we'll ask the question in those tough moments, what would Jill do? How would she think about this? She'd be ferociously angry with whoever slighted, even vaguely cast any aspersion on Johns Hopkins. But after she did that, she would start thinking about a way in which we can enlist people and bring them around and ultimately fuel the trajectory of this university. So it's with that, I acknowledge that, yeah, there's a lot of challenges, and for a time, I was really perseverating for many, many days and weeks about the prospect of the loss, but we're gonna be okay because you've touched us in a way that is profoundly, profoundly enduring, indelible. And for that, we thank you and we love you, and we're so proud to be associated with you for 33 years.
Ron, thank you very much. I realize arrogantly I started the program without saying, for anybody who I haven't had a chance to get to know over your time, I'm Fritz Schrader, and I've had the privilege of working for Jill for nearly 30 years at Johns Hopkins. Also, for those of you keeping count, I think Ron got 5 audible "aww." So for the rest of us speaking, just if you're competitive, I'm gonna go for 6. Look, as I look around the room and I think about Jill and her time, I think there are only a handful of us, and I'm looking at Bill, I'm looking at Sally, I'm looking at Susan DeMuth and Marguerite and others who have actually can even claim to be in the same tenure neighborhood as Jill and her impact on this institution. There are literally thousands of alumni and donors around the world who can directly trace their involvement back, Jill, to you and your spirit of generosity. Always inclusive, always making time for people inside the institution and outside the institution. There are more than just a few faculty and staff who can attest to this commitment, and not just to the institution, as Ron said, but to the people of this institution. always making time to listen, to understand what we care about, what they care about, looking to engage them in ways that are meaningful and impactful. In trying to think about Jill's impact on this institution, I reached out to a couple friends to say, all right, what do you say about Jill? And one in particular, our friend and colleague, Kristen Blanchfield, who many of you know and love well, and who is now over at Imperial College in London, wrote back and at the invitation, and after her working with Jill for more than a decade, she said the one thing that comes to mind is Jill's knitting and how she has made and shared so many wonderful creations with her Hopkins friends and family, and that her knitting is a metaphor for the community that she has knit together across, oh, there was one awe, across Johns Hopkins and around the world. And I thought that was beautiful. And I appreciated Kristen's note, and I appreciated the apt metaphor for Jill's impact. And I'm also going to confess that I don't know much about knitting. And while I admit that I went down the TikTok rabbit hole on knitting reels, and who knew that Yarn Talk actually exists, and it went about exactly as you'd expect once you go down that rabbit hole. It is now flooding my Instagram and my Amazon, selling needles and yarn and things that I never expected. But what I do know, all kidding aside, is what an incredible relationship person Jill is and has been, and what an incredible fundraiser she has been for this institution, truly not slowing up even in these final months of her time here. I learned something recently about Jill's final few months, and I want to share this. And I'm guessing a few of you, as I look around, particularly at some of the alumni and donors who work with Jill, will look around to each other and go, you too? In these past few months, Jill did just as any good fundraiser with 30 plus years of experience would do. She used her own personal journey to influence the impact that others are making for the institution. In this case, it was a lot of, Chuck, you're the last ask that I'm gonna be making while I am working here, and I really wanna close your gift before I leave. I'm not gonna tell you how many people heard that script, but as we run up to June 30th, Jill, thank you. And you've got about 3 more weeks, so please keep working at it. What I can say, as Ron referenced, is that Jill's reach and influence is global and it spans generations. In fact, I think Jill is quite certainly at Hopkins, but at higher ed in general, one of the quintessential examples of the strength of a relationship in an institution and the work that we do in advancement and engagement. I don't think there are many of us at Hopkins, and quite frankly, many nationally, who can say not only do they know donors and volunteers and alumni, but they know their children, and in many cases, they know their grandchildren. And Jill, you are one of those people who spans so many generations and whose family think of Jill as part of their own family. The number of bar and bat mitzvahs and weddings and anniversaries that you have gone to really is extraordinary. My one insight into this, and I don't know if you remember this, but way, way, way early on, and I don't think they're in the room, so I'm not going to embarrass anybody, and if anybody knows this family, you have to keep it to yourself in the privacy of the room. The Batoff family. Yeah. They had 2 sons who came to Hopkins, Jeremy and Stephen, and they enjoyed their time at Hopkins. And I can remember sitting at a lacrosse game, and Jill was there, and both of them had shown up on a Saturday, probably had a really fun morning, and I'll just leave it at that, and were misbehaving during the lacrosse game. And Jill was seated near me, and I saw her stand up, and I looked at her and I said, Jill, what are you gonna do? She goes, those are the Batoff boys. They will not do this if they see me. And I thought, that is the magic of Jill Paulson. And I'm pretty sure they did kind of clean up from that day on. Ron mentioned the Leadership Fellows, and we have a lot of Leadership Fellows with us. The current cohort is actually here today, tomorrow. We have a graduation ceremony with them. With 145 graduates over the last 10 years, there are Leadership Fellows now on alumni boards, on councils, on dean's advisory councils, all across Hopkins, including the Board of Trustees, as you heard Ron reference. At one of our recent trustee meetings, Jill came to present, and while she was met with a flurry of praise from some of our most notable trustees, One in particular said, "Fritz, are you going to put a statue up for Jill?" Fortunately, what I said is we have a real clear policy about statues on this campus. But I do want to say Jill was often our secret weapon. Jill was the person when we couldn't figure out how to make something work in terms of a relationship or a volunteer moment, you'd send Jill in. And over the course of sending Jill into those moments, I want to share, according to some research that I've done and her team has helped me with, Jill has personally been responsible for more than $112 million worth of individual commitments to this institution. And that is an extraordinary number and likely underestimated in terms of the actual impact and the ripples in the pond. The final thing I want to close with is we have often thought in our deep investment in leadership and learning and professional growth, and I saw Liz here, we've often thought about standing up a class that's called Teach Them How to Jill. She actually became a verb in training, teaching someone how to Jill. But in reality, what we know is that it's really about the relationship. It's not about classroom theory. And so, Jill, I simply want to say to you, on behalf of all of us who have watched you do this, thank you for teaching us and inspiring us in the art of relationships, which is the cornerstone of everything that we do on behalf of this institution. You have set the bar so incredibly high, and we are forever the legacy that you have left at this institution. So thank you. And it is now my honor to give you one more person to the podium who is probably the quintessential Jill Paulson product, and that is my friend Chuck Clarvin.
So first I'm going to start with some wry humor. Everybody here knows that Hopkins has had to institute a no hiring process. You don't know the reason for that, and that's because Fritz keeps running to Ron's office saying, I need 10 people to replace Jill. So how do you talk about somebody who spent over 30 years of your life becoming part of your family? Excuse me. She doesn't sell any of her donors. She becomes part of their family. I'll take one. So, so many of the donors here in the room and across the university and medicine complex have so much to give back to Jill. Our names may appear on various walls around the campus. There may be a number of professors who are teaching here due to the generosity of so many great donors. But Jill never came to sell us, right? There's no art of the deal here. There's a love of the person, helping them to understand what the gift means to the people that work on this campus, to understand that a school does not exist if it doesn't have unbelievable students, many who don't have the financial capability of being here, or the professors. We couldn't afford them without having these wonderful gifts. Now, one of the things I pride myself, and Jill always helps me with this, is I want to do all the things that Mike Bloomberg wouldn't think of. And there's only one other really, really creative person I've come across to help me think through some of those really, really fun gifts. And that's what stewardship is really all about. You can't teach that. You can't just say to a development officer, this is how it's done. You gotta watch somebody like Jill do it and how she becomes part of your family. Down to my son and my daughter, a part of, and Jill knows this, many of you in the room don't, We're donors to a room that we're naming in her honor over at the Student Union. We've collected over now $326,000. And I just want you all to remember one last thing. The number doesn't matter because she's worth infinity. So thank you all. For those in the room who participated, we're still open for bids, just so you know. And just an amazing, amazing woman. I love her. Here you go.
Thank you so much. For those of you who... Oh, yes, thank you. For those of you whom I haven't had the pleasure of meeting just yet, I'm Jill's husband, David, and you can just call me her plus one, because for the past 33 years, that's what I've been, and very proudly and very honorably. I'm used to talking to people about commercial real estate, which is my profession. So you'll please forgive any stage fright in front of so many very talented and very accomplished people. I was only given 30 minutes to speak, and I'll try and be respectful of everybody's time. But actually, what I have to say was validated, I think, already by President Ron, by Fritz, and by Chuck, because a lot of what you've said I have in my remarks, and I'll try and be as succinct as possible. Let me share a little secret with you. You may have had Jill for 33 years. I've been with Jill for 41 years. And I will tell you that the first time I met Jill, I knew I was going to marry her. She wasn't so sure, and for some reason wanted to be wooed a little bit. But the reason I mention that is because some of the things that I saw in Jill when we first met are things that have made her so successful here at Hopkins. Most of you are not old enough to remember a composer named Cole Porter, but Cole Porter wrote a song called You're the Tops, and he referred to the Louvre Museum and the Tower of Pisa and the Colosseum. And there's an analogy to Jill. Can't look at her too much. There's an analogy to Jill in that Jill is indeed the tops. And I know that here at Hopkins, there have been many, many buildings that she's contributed to, along with her colleagues, to bring them to fruition, including this stunning Gilman Hall. Just a couple of weeks ago, Jill called me in tears. And I was very concerned, being the quintessential Jewish husband, what's wrong? And I thought something bad had happened. She had just had lunch with Chuck and with Sarah O'Hagan in New York, and they told her about the naming of the room. And I know that Chuck's fingerprints are all over this since day one. And it's rarely possible that Jill is speechless, but to have two Paulsons who are speechless at the same time is really quite extraordinary. Putting Jill's fundraising and development and leadership training accomplishments aside for a minute, I think if you were to ask Jill what her biggest accomplishments have been, or her biggest accomplishment has been building relationships. And she would say it's not necessarily about the money, it's about the relationships. If you build relationships and acknowledge the potential in emerging leaders, the money will come, and indeed it has. I think actually the best title for Jill would have been ambassador, and that has been alluded to previously this evening. She has, wherever we have gone, either personally or professionally, she has served as a one-person ambassador for Hopkins, and I can testify to that because I've been the plus one, listening to this admirably for so long. For a long time, we would host an annual party at our house for incoming students and their parents. And I remember one year, there were about 50 or 60 people at our house, and Jill went around the room and identified every individual by name, first name and last name, what the relationship was to the incoming student. So she introduced the student, the parents, the brothers, the sisters. She told everybody what dorm they were going to be in, what they were majoring in, and how to find her. And she also probably knew how much each parent made, but that's different. There's another side to what Jill has done for Hopkins, in addition to the fundraising and leadership development. She would get calls from parents 24/7, and here are a few that stand out. I haven't heard from my kid in 7 days. I live in Hong Kong. Can you track them down and call me back? And maybe you can get them to call me as well. My son is at the health center and I'm in Florida. Can you check in on them? That's probably a HIPAA violation. My daughter has to move. This is a true story. I remember this. My daughter has to move out of her dorm in 24 hours. She has ADHD. She hasn't started to pack. Can you help? She was out in 12 hours. So people came to recognize Jill as a valuable resource. One last story I'd like to mention, and it involves the late Sylvia Eggleston Ware. And it stuck in my mind for a number of years. At one time, we traveled to London together, and she pulled me aside and told me a story that an auditor had come to visit them at their office over here in this whole building, Lyman Building. And he commented that Jill's travel expenses were somewhat higher than the travel expenses of other people on the staff. And Sylvia looked at him and said, Jill Paulson raises more money than anyone else in this office, and she can travel anywhere, anytime she wants. End of discussion. I always thought that Sylvia was a particularly bright woman. In closing, thank you very much, sweetheart, for letting me join you on this extraordinary journey. Come here. It's been a pleasure, and I don't think on July 1st that Hopkins is going to be out of Jill's system. But she has also, while she's been in Hopkins, of course, helped raise a wonderful family. She's not only an extraordinary wife, mother, grandmother, and daughter, but Jill's mom turned 98 a couple weeks ago, and Jill is her main caregiver, and she's found time to do all this while still being Hopkins ambassador. So Jill, on behalf of me and the girls, we love you, we respect you, and we're in awe of your accomplishments.
I am overwhelmed. Y'all know I am a giver. It's hard for me to be a receiver, but I am just overwhelmed. Thank you, Ron, Fritz, David, and all of you here. I mean, y'all are really my family. Ron and Fritz, y'all have given me such an extraordinary opportunity to serve this great institution. You've given me the space to be creative, look for holes. You know, I use that term a lot. To work alongside incredible colleagues, alumni friends. You always will have a place in my heart. Chuck, it's been an honor to see the impact you've made here. You, Nancy, and your kids will always be chosen family. A special shout out, Ashlyn, Sade, Nathan's not here, Eileen, where's Eileen? For putting this together while preparing for the 10th anniversary of the Leadership Fellows meeting the next 2 days. Chuck, Sarah Hagen, Kathy Pye, Amy Zipper, Rachel, where are you? There you are. Grant, and all of you came up with the idea of this incredible room in the Student Center. You know, many of you heard when people said, why this timing? And I said, well, I promised David I'd retire when I was 70. So I have a few months left on that. The Leadership Fellows would be celebrating its 10th anniversary, and the Hopkins Student Center would be open. Never in a million years would I ever think that so many of y'all contributed. So I did do, some of y'all may know, in honor of our girls, because I wanted to be part of the Student Center. We're actually funding a tiny room that'll be in their names. They've given so much to me while I've been here. And I'm really grateful that Sarah Hagen, Kathy Pike, and Rachel Hitchcock gave me a heads up that this was coming. I am an ugly crier. And I'm happy that you've been spared that. But what I feel most today is gratitude. When I was first approached to apply for the role of director of the Second Decade Society, I thought, Hopkins sounds interesting, and it's big enough that I can grow in my career. Never would I imagine it would become so much more. Hopkins became my heart. The alumni worked with, the colleagues I've stood behind, the leaders I've had the privilege to support. You become my family, additional family. Ron, from the moment you were introduced to the faculty and staff, I knew you were going to be an extraordinary leader. It's been an honor to help advance your vision for the school. And it's been an incredible ride, and I'm just so grateful. And Fritz, your leadership, and I've loved every minute working on your team and allowing me to serve a place I love. To my colleagues, alumni friends, you're the reason these 33 years never felt like work. Your passion, your dedication have made this journey joyful and meaningful. And together, you're right, I hope we've built something lasting. To the leadership programs team, past and present, I'm so proud of what we've accomplished. I know the program will continue under Kirsten and Maureen's leadership, and I'm excited to see the impact the fellows are going to continue to make on this institution. To my family, David, thank you for holding everything together. When I traveled for all the rushes, you should be around family events. We're all weeping. For all the Rosh Hashanah luncheons where we had, students, and Jim and Hillary were there. Passover Seders, we had 50 students. After that happened, never again. For the evenings, weekends, and travel, you were always there, and I couldn't do it without you. Abby and Dana, thank you for sharing me with the Hopkins community. You never complained when I brought you to lacrosse games or work events. You supported me then, and you now continue to support Dad and Grandma when I'm away. This means everything to me. This journey has been full of purpose, joy, and connection. Seeing alumni light up when they realize their impact, that never got old, and that joy has fueled me and will continue to fuel me. I love you all. You will always be part of my heart.
So there isn't a norm with a champagne toast at the end of a farewell, but this feels really appropriate that we take this moment, and I'm gonna invite the president to come back to offer a toast. But I wanna actually, Ashlyn and Katie, get your help. We have a gift on behalf of all of your colleagues in Development and Alumni Relations that you do not need to open because it's in that box. But the sample that I want to show you is something that I think you know what it is because we've been giving it to other people who have been the cornerstone of the Hopkins Student Center.
Oh my God.
So Jill, this will be for you in the home in Atlanta that we hope always reminds you of the role that you played, not just in this building, but in this institution at large.
Oh my God, it's gorgeous. Some of y'all know I just redid my office. This is going to be beautiful. Thank you.
So with that, let me invite President Daniels back up.
So just one last thing to do is that I ask you all to raise your glasses, and we say, of course, thank you, all the best to you, Jill, to your wonderful family, David, for those wonderful remarks. Abby, Dana, thank you for sharing your moment with us. And Jill, I guess what we say in these moments and our faith is l'chaim, to life. L'chaim, Jill.
All of you. Thank you.
All the best, Jill.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here, and Chris, thanks.
See, I still have to talk.